Somewhere in America today, a school is closing. Not because it failed, not because a scandal broke. It's closing because the hallways are quiet, the classrooms are half full, and the number that used to fill them just isn't there anymore. You'd think a school shuts down because something went wrong inside it, but the real answer is far stranger. The building is fine, the teachers are fine, it's the country around it that changed. Start with a number. Last school year, more than 1,000 public schools closed across the United States. That's not a rumor. That's federal data, and it's not a one-time blip either. It's the fourth year in a row that closures have climbed. Back in 2021, the count was 755. Now it's over 1,000. Something is accelerating, and it isn't happening in one state or one city or one kind of neighborhood. It's happening in Philadelphia. It's happening in Houston. It's happening in tiny towns in Idaho with fewer than 300 students total. So what could possibly connect all of them? Here's the twist most people miss. It's not political. It's not really even about education policy. It's math. Cold, simple math. Fewer children are being born in America than at almost any point in modern history. Fewer babies eventually means fewer kindergartners. Fewer kindergartners means fewer students moving through the system every single year after that. Marguerite Rosa, who studies school funding at Georgetown University's Edunomics Lab, has a name for this. She calls it the big shrink, and that phrase captures something important. This isn't a sudden collapse. It's a slow, steady contraction, playing out district by district, year by year. Think about how a school actually survives financially. Most public schools are funded per student. More kids enrolled means more money coming in. Fewer kids enrolled means less money, even if the building costs exactly the same to heat, staff, and maintain. A school with 600 students and a school with 300 students need the same roof, the same electricity, often the same number of hallways to walk down, but one of them is getting paid for twice as many kids. You can guess which one is in trouble. And now stack a second problem on top of the first. During the pandemic, the federal government sent a massive wave of emergency funding to schools. Billions of dollars meant to keep classrooms running while enrollment dipped and families scrambled. For a while, it worked like a cushion. Schools could absorb the enrollment losses without immediately closing buildings, but that money had an expiration date, and now it's gone. Brookings Institution fellow Sophocles Goulas, who has tracked this closely, put it bluntly. Enrollment declines are showing up everywhere. The cushion is gone. The decline underneath it never actually stopped. So picture a district finance office right now. They're looking at three numbers at once: enrollment that's been falling for years, emergency funding that just ran out, and a set of buildings that were built for a much bigger student population decades ago. What do? They can't shrink a building's utility bill just because fewer kids show up. So eventually they consolidate. Two half-empty schools become one full one. It's not cruelty, it's arithmetic. But enrollment isn't only falling because of birth rates. There's a second current running underneath it. Families are choosing differently. Charter school enrollment grew by more than 60% over the last decade, even as enrollment in traditional public school districts shrank. Homeschooling numbers rose too, especially after the pandemic normalized learning outside a traditional classroom. Private school choice programs have expanded in several states, giving families public dollars to spend somewhere other than their local public school. None of these choices are villains here. Each one on its own is a parent trying to do right by their kid, but multiply that decision across millions of households, and a public school system built around a certain number of neighborhood kids starts to feel the gap. There's also a geographic piece to this puzzle. Populations are moving. Some families are leaving expensive, dense cities for the suburbs or for entirely different states altogether. When a neighborhood loses families, its local elementary school loses students, sometimes years before anyone at the district office even reacts to it. By the time a school board votes on a closure, the decline has usually been building for close to a decade. Now here's where it gets almost cinematic, in a quiet, tragic way. Closing a school rarely fixes the underlying problem. It often speeds it up. When a neighborhood school closes, some families don't wait for a bus to a new building. They leave the district entirely, which shrinks enrollment even further, which puts the next school on the list. Researchers call this a downward spiral, and once it starts, it's remarkably hard to reverse. Miami-Dade lost thousands of students in a single year and voted to consolidate 9 schools. Houston approved closing a dozen buildings, citing both declining enrollment and repair bills that ran into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Philadelphia's superintendent, standing in front of families about to lose their neighborhood school, called public schools anchors of communities. He wasn't wrong. And that's exactly what makes this so hard to watch. So who's affected the most? Ask yourself. What kind of place has both an aging population and fewer new families moving in? Rural towns feel this first and hardest. A district with 257 students total can't easily absorb the loss of even a few dozen kids. In Idaho, one tiny town voted to keep a 24-student elementary school open, almost as an act of defiance against the math. Big cities aren't spared either. Some of America's largest districts, including New York, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia, have seen enrollment drops near 10% since before the pandemic. When both ends of the spectrum, sprawl sprawling cities and tiny rural towns are losing students at the same time, you're not looking at a local problem. You're looking at a national one, and the projections don't offer much relief. Federal estimates suggest public school enrollment will keep falling through the early 2030s, with the system potentially losing close to 4 million students compared to pre-pandemic levels. Elementary schools already have fewer kids enrolled than middle and high schools do right now, which is a preview of what's coming. The kindergarten class that would refill an elementary school simply isn't as large as the graduating class walking out the door. Here's the part that reframes everything, though. It's tempting to picture this as decline, empty hallways, fading communities, a system running out of steam. But look closer, and it's really a story about how fast American life has changed in one generation. Families are smaller, choices are wider, people move more freely between cities, states, and school systems than they used to. The public school system built in the mid-20th century was designed for a country having more children, staying in one place longer, and choosing from far fewer educational options. That country doesn't exist in quite the same way anymore. The buildings are simply catching up to a shift that already happened in living rooms, in birth certificates, and in family decisions made years before a single school board meeting. Which brings it back to you. Maybe you drove past a shuttered elementary school and never thought twice about it. Maybe your own hometown just merged two schools into one. It's easy to read that as a sign something is falling apart, but it might be more accurate to read it as a mirror, a reflection of how differently people are choosing to live, learn, and grow up in America today compared to the generation before them. Somewhere in America today, a school is closing, and it's not because it failed, it's because the country outgrew the shape it was built for.